Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for coming to our final presentation before National Voter Registration Day. My name is Alan Blackwell, and I am the Program Director for National Voter Registration Day. Today's webinar will be about talking with voters. Thank you. And before we begin, I just want to say a quick shout out to our premier partners. If you are participating, thank you for the work. To our premier sponsors, who have helped to fund this program and make sure that the holiday is a success every year. And to you, our community partners who are doing that direct work in the community, we thank you for your hard work and effort, because this holiday would not be the success it is without those direct contacts and confirmations that people receive from having voter registration days. So let's do a brief recap of last year's National Voter Registration Day. And if you were lucky enough to be on some of our earlier webinars, we went to all this in more detail. I recommend, if you have an opportunity, please to go to our YouTube page and look at some of the previous webinars that we've had. But last year we had over 400,000 voters who have registered under National Voter Registration Day. So that's a great marker for mid-year. We had 4,200 community partners. This year we are currently a little over 3,800 community partners. So we are not only having success in a quote unquote off year, and there are no off years, but in a year like this, where there's not as much national attention, it's great to just see our community partners still participating. We had over 100 premier partners, and that's our large corporate partners that support the work that we're doing. This year alone, we've had roughly a little over 95 premier partners who have signed on. So we're having similar success, even in a year where the recognition is not as high. Last year, we were #1 trending hashtag on X, or as many of us know it, Twitter. And dominated many other platforms through that work. And last but never least, we increased voter turnout. The goal of this work is always to build on democracy, and the first step in building a stronger democracy is getting more people involved. So what are we doing this year to move this work forward? First and foremost, we're building momentum for 2024. This is the last National Voter Registration Day before the primaries begin next year, right? So this is a great opportunity to start mobilizing your community and getting them involved. Also, tens of thousands of local elections are occurring across the nation. So this is a very intimate year, right? Where in previous years, millions of votes might have swayed a decision. This year, hundreds or even thousands of votes can really impact local communities. So you playing a part in voter registration is actually more impactful this year, because you're working with less people who will participate, but their vote is worth a lot more because they're moving the litmus in their community. And then last, like I said earlier, we are doing the last National Voter Registration Day for 2020, 2024. And I want to just keep in mind that all democracy is local, and that the work that you do locally really moves what we do nationally. So that building of community and of culture and mobilizing your family is really helpful to not only yourself or your community, but to the greater communities that are both impacted by your work and are benefiting from the work that you do. Our overarching goals for this year. So we're looking to encourage more voter registration, just raise the awareness of voter registration for folks. So as you're talking to those individuals, you really are informing, you're becoming a teacher in those moments to a person who may just be seeking more clarity. Or if there's someone who's coming in with their own objectives, you get the ability to persuade them to understand the power of voter registration versus worrying about what political party they're a part of. The beauty of National Voter Registration Day is we're a nonpartisan event. So it's not really to persuade people who to vote for. It is all about getting them registered to vote and understand the importance of that power. Elevating trust in nonpartisan resources and giving them to individuals about their elections, right? So we, on our website, provide a state-by-state toolkit that you can access. And if you want to just learn more about some of the changes that have occurred in the last 12 months in your state, we will supply those resources on our website. And it also will give you the ability to really articulate the work that's happening in your community by a trusted resource. And then last but never least, the most important part about National Voter Registration Day is building that excitement and that fun, right? The beauty of this holiday is we are all about happiness and celebration, right? This is a celebration of democracy, and it's a celebration of the hard work of folks. And then not only does it do that, but it also builds on our civic holiday friends who are doing great work in their respective organizations, and really gives us an opportunity to start that energy moving in a positive manner all the way into the election and even after the election. So before I start the conversation, I want to focus on this tool in particular, This is our map, and as you can see, we are missing a lot of you on this map. So if you get an opportunity, please go on our map, on our website, go to the events and submit your events. You can see over in the bottom left-hand corner, we even have supporters in Hawaii. So if we have folks all across the nation, we even have some in the past who are from Guam or Germany. We would love for you to just celebrate the work that you're doing and also give people an opportunity to join your movement, right? Because what you'll find and what we've heard from previous supporters and community partners is that they go to this website and they see, hey, someone else in my community is doing this great work. Why don't we work together, right? So this is that opportunity to build that coalition or build that community that you're looking for. We love it. And it gives us a great opportunity to celebrate the work that everyone's doing. So if you have opportunity, please go on our website and sign up your events so that we all know what the great work that you're doing. What do we know? The first thing that we know is that 1 out of 4 people aren't registered or don't know how to register properly, right? And I'd say the second part is probably more of a focus than the first, right? The first is people will know if they're registered or not. They can answer that with a simple yes or no. But what people really do not know is, am I registered where I live? Did I change my address? Did I register properly? I might have moved from one state to another, and it's within the election cycle. So I don't know if I am a registered voter in this community. That's a unique opportunity for you to help facilitate that conversation and help folks to check their registration and see if it's properly put in the system. And if not, they have an opportunity right there with you to make that change. We also know that 25% of voters who are eligible just don't vote, right? So it speaks to the reality is 3 out of 4 will participate to some extent or will want to be a part of this. That one is really where you get a unique opportunity. So if you think about it, and I love statistics in particular, that if I talk to 4 people, one of them is the person who needed to hear me in that moment. What I do is I look at it from a numbers perspective. So the more people you talk to, the more opportunities to find those individuals. And we love that work, right? Also seeing that there are gaps that exist in the registration rate. So quite often it is asking for voter registration information is very intimate, right? People are sharing their personal information. And it's something that they will do based on trust. So understanding the needs of the individual will give you the opportunity to really address what are the barriers that people are facing to get registered to vote, and also to share those with your organization or our organization so that we can address those things moving forward, and also share those with your elected officials so that you can speak to some of the gaps that we're experiencing across the country. And also knowing that the presidential primaries are right around the corner, and that's really what motivates a lot of individuals. But the work that happens on days like today and moving forward are really what grounds us to make those decisions, right? So it's not worrying about who the president will be, it's really being mindful of the primaries coming up, and that will select the candidate. So it gives you a unique opportunity. So today we're going to talk about in-person voter engagement, and just to ground this conversation, there are a couple of key items you want to keep in mind. One is a one-on-one interaction. When you're in a group setting, the group dynamics take over. So understand that if you can get a person one-on-one and have that one-on-one conversation, it provides a unique opportunity to really build those relationships. Also, voters get an opportunity to ask questions. We all have questions that we want answers to. And quite often, where we go to get those answers are from other people who may not know as well as us, right? So you have a unique opportunity to share an answer, or what I find to be most empowering, telling someone you don't know, but giving them a direction to go in, right? It's I may not know who your elected officials are in your community, but I can refer you to a resource that can help you, right? And I can give you a factual website to go off of, and not a one that's being monitored by people who are just being partisan and just looking for clicks. Also building trust around the community, and last but not least, making the registration feel less transactional, right? This is a net benefit to all of us. So it is beautiful when we all participate. You do not need to sell people on voting. What you're really there to do is educate, inform, and inspire, right? You standing there and pushing people is really the inspiration that many people need, just knowing that we're here to help them. So with that said, we will begin our conversation. But before we begin that, I would like to introduce our 2 speakers today. The first I would like to introduce Lauren Kunis, who is, and I like to put a little extra shine on it, a former director of National Voter Registration Day. So she is my predecessor, has really built in some great systems and has really led this work. And I will say to her benefit, she was the program director during 2020. I'm going to let that sit for a second. During 2020, she was the program director of National Voter Registration Day, right? So it's a great opportunity to talk to one of those people who are on the front lines moving the work forward. And now Lauren also has a career working in democracy. She is the program director of Vote Riders. And Vote Riders, I love the work that they're doing because really they're focusing their energy around getting people the documentation, the resources so that they can vote, right? Which is a very important piece in our democracy. How do we give people the tools so that they can go into the voting booth? Because quite often folks find out they can register, but to actually vote requires more information and additional resources. And Lauren is pushing that work forward. The second person I'd love to introduce is Tappan Vickery. And Tappan was actually one of the first people I had spoken to when I had taken this role. And she is Senior Director of Program and Strategy for HeadCount. HeadCount, just so that some of you may not know, and Tappan will give you more information around this, but it is those people that you see at your concert who everyone else is going to enjoy Beyonce, and you have one person saying, hey, did you register to vote? That is the great work that is occurring through HeadCount, right? It's taking moments where people are excited already and finding a way to connect them right back to democracy, right? And I love that because they're not only limited to concerts or big events, they're also at local events, right? I participated and supported some of the work they were doing during Pride Month, right? Just to see the great work of connecting directly to the community, I very much appreciate that. So with that said, I'd like everyone to raise your hands. I know we can't see you, but I'm gonna feel you in spirit to welcome Lauren and tap into the conversation. Thank you again for coming. So I would like to start this conversation with my first question. Can you touch a bit on voter messaging early? And by that, I mean, how do we message out to folks to get them involved? And what advice would you give to volunteers who are engaging with voters face to face?
You know, when we are engaging face to face with voters, as you mentioned, a lot of times we're really lucky to have a cultural moment, and we really focus on the concept of having it also be a peer-to-peer moment. And that's something that's very unique. Democracy, while it's definitely not still taught in schools the way it should be, we know that it sort of feels like government voting is a little above you, maybe you don't feel like it's personal. And when you have a peer-to-peer engagement with someone, it makes it personal. And if it's someone who's from your community, it makes it even more personal. You don't always need a rock band behind you to make that personal connection, for sure. So I think that eye contact, smiling, finding people who aren't in a rush and actually connecting with them. I think a lot of times one of the things that's changed over the years that I've been doing this work is how much people are just kind of looking at their phones. And what I've noticed is that you actually will get a great interaction with someone if you get them out of their phone, because most of the time they're bored and they're tuned out and you are tuning them back in. So don't be afraid to connect with somebody that seems like they're focused on their phone. Maybe they're typing an email furiously. That might not be the person, but if they're scrolling, you can make a huge difference by actually speaking to them or approaching them. So I think those are our main tactics, is to create that personal peer-to-peer moment. And then, a smile and a simple, hey, are you registered to vote at your current address? That really does it. If they're asking why you're doing it, you want to talk about MVRD, that's also exciting. But most of the time you have 10 seconds to turn that peer-to-peer moment into a voter registration, and you don't want to waste it trying to be too comprehensive. You're there, but to make it easy and do something that is simple. It takes 90 seconds to fill out the form. So just remember, this is a very concise moment once you make that personal introduction.
Yeah, if I'll plus one everything that Tappan said, as always. But yeah, some things I would add to that already really comprehensive response is that, when I was looking at this question this morning, I was taking a little bit of a trip down memory lane. And the very first campaign I ever worked on when I was 17, I remember we had 4 big posters up in sort of the break room where everyone was getting snacks and hanging out. And it said, right message, right voters, right time, and right messenger. And that was supposed to be sort of how we framed all of our thinking about all of our campaign plans. And one of the things I really love about National Voter Registration Day is that it empowers so many right messengers from across the country in this sort of open source day of action, where you pick the place, you pick the type of event, you keep it fun, you keep it informal, and pick the message that works well for you and your community, because that's what's going to stick and that's what's going to engage people when you're out there in the community. You know, at Vote Riders, we focus on the issue of ID. So the ID you need to register and vote. And we're very often, because of that work, in a position as trusted messenger. You know, the ID that we are offering to help people get for free at places like food banks or shelters is sort of our way in the door to be a trusted messenger and someone that we can someone who can speak you know, with authenticity about the importance of getting registered and voting and being able to make an impact in your community. Another anecdote that I was thinking about when I saw this question was way back in my college organizing days, I was sent by my boss, this was a questionable decision, to register voters who were smoking outside of bars late night. And it was because the mayor had just passed a law where you could no longer smoke in bars. This shows how old I am and how long I've been registering voters, because no one does that anymore. But, you know, that was a very out of the box tactic, but actually it was really effective because it was a way to capture people in the moment who were thinking about the connection between elections and laws and how that impacts their life. So as you're out there registering voters on National Voter Registration Day, and hopefully all the time, you know, I would encourage folks to think about, oh, I'm being corrected. Smoking in bars is still legal in Missouri. You learn something new every day. But anyways, you know, think about the issues that the people out there might care about. So if you're at a subway or bus stop, think about the impact on elections when it comes to public transit. If you're near a school, you can talk about funding for public education. If you are, you know, at a park, you can talk about how local decision makers decide when to keep parks open and what to do. So all of those things that help you sort of speak with authenticity and in a way that really connects the act of registering to vote to the issues that matter to people.
Thank you both. And I want to add to that and kind of ask you a question, if you can help, because we have some new people here who this is their first time registering people to vote. And we have some who are veterans like Lauren, who are really just, you know, doing great work over time. So can you tell us about your experience with NVRD or National Voter Registration Day and how you engage potential voters?
So yeah, so I've been celebrating National Voter Registration Day for a long time as a volunteer, and then in 2019 and 2020 was a professional hype woman for the holiday, and I hope got the chance to work with many of the folks on this call in registering voters ahead of the 2020 elections. At Vote Riders, Vote Riders is a premier partner of National Voter Registration Day this year and has been for at least the past several years. We always like to take part in this day of action by being a trusted messenger and sort of engaging our community to think about voting, to talk about voting, and make it about voter registration, but all the other steps you might need to take to cast a ballot successfully. So some of our plans for this year include doing a virtual volunteer event. We're going to be writing letters to voters in 5 states to share information on the local elections coming up, the ID you need to register and vote, and offer free help to anyone who needs it. We're going to be blasting out information on social media, of course, and our teams of staff and volunteers across the country are going to be out there in the communities lots of times in partnership with other organizations, you know, engaging voters to make sure they know about elections coming up, offering help to register, and from our sort of unique niche, also making sure that people know what ID they might need to cast a ballot in person or by mail, and really encouraging them to do it this year and every year.
I It's so crazy, not crazy. It's exciting. It's inspiring all the different ways that different organizations come together and do something that's unique, and also individuals that come together to do something that's unique and serve this holiday. And I just am feeling super inspired by some of the creative stuff that you just mentioned, Lauren. Headcount was a founding partner of National Voter Registration Day a very long time ago, over a decade. And at that moment, it was really a concept of just like hitting the streets, a coordinated hit the streets effort. It was before Nonprofit Vote took over the coordination and really took this to a whole other level, including getting the phenomenal endorsements of secretaries of states and proclamations and other things that have really made it a real civic holiday. But Headcount's role since then, as Alan mentioned, we register voters historically just at concerts and festivals, and we've broadened that a lot to do digital campaigns and serve community events and be at sporting events and work with brands. So we've grown a lot over the past 20 years from our inception. But National Voter Registration Day has been the day where we still have asked our volunteers to hit the streets, and also our artists and partners to hit the streets. Now, hit the streets is a little different for a lot of our artists and brands partners, because they have created real social media moments out of National Voter Registration Day. We've earned, millions of impressions and hundreds of thousands of voter registrations simply by having our advocates and artist partners post and encourage people to register to vote. We also have some do direct text or emails to their communities. And so that's incredibly powerful and has really buoyed us to continue to grow the moment. In the field this year, I'm really excited about our activation in Washington Square Park in New York City, which is where our office is based. There we're partnering with NYU, the Civic Engagement Office of New York City. We also have our longtime partners, Tony's Chocolonely, and new partners, Partake Cookies there. Other partners include Yerba Mate and I can never say it right, Gayaki Yerba Mate. And then also we'll be working with the Body Shop, both in Washington Square Park, but also in a bunch of their retail locations to support their Be Seen, Be Heard campaign. We're also going to be at baseball games through our partnerships with the Major League Baseball leagues and several of the clubs. So like this year is really cool because our partnerships are broadening our reach, and our community events are like in retail and sports. We also have so many people that go into schools, both high schools and colleges. And it's a really exciting moment to see like our volunteer-based team leaders all over the country find those unique opportunities in their communities to go be the trusted voice and use their headcount training to do community organizing. And it's really lifted up. If it wasn't for National Voter Registration Day, I don't know that we would have built a community program like we have, because this was the beginning of us training our leads to do community organizing many years ago, and it's turned into something that's really phenomenal.
I appreciate that. And there was a question actually directed to you, Tappan, if you don't mind answering. Does Headcount collaborate with organizations to identify large events in our community for VR opportunities throughout the year?
If you are a community organization and you're interested in collaborating on a voter registration drive, we would absolutely love to support you. Identifying large events, like a lot of times we work with events that are based on our artist touring schedules, but we love to have community partners come out with us and invite community volunteers. That's actually something my colleague, Tom Bergen, is attending this call right now, and he's been working really hard on that. And we've dedicated a lot of resources to it. So you can email me at any time. It's at tappanv, T-A-P-P-A-N-V @headcount.org if you have interest in doing a partnership and a large scale activation in your community.
Thank you for that. We know that everyone who volunteers will be engaging, but are not necessarily eligible to vote. How do you suggest approaching the question of eligibility, and what might be some of the ways to make people still feel included?
Sure, that's a great question. And I'm happy to answer it, from my personal perspective, but also the perspective that our Vote Riders staff and organizers and volunteers use. This is something we deal with a lot. Like I mentioned before, we work in lots of sort of more non-traditional voter engagement spaces. We do site-based works at high schools, at community resource fairs, at food banks and shelters, at re-entry organizations as part of wraparound services. It's really important when you're out there in the community, in public, to not make anyone feel excluded, and not make anyone feel sort of uncomfortable or targeted, that you're asking them about their citizenship status or age or involvement with the justice system previously. It's important to sort of be welcoming. So a really easy sort of way to talk about this is say, are you eligible to vote? And there are lots of different reasons for which someone might not be, or might not yet be. So the first thing is to ask people about age. If someone is not of voting age yet, lots of states offer pre-registration. I know HeadCount has lots of great resources on that. So I'll preview pre-registration, but then let's tap and take y'all a little deeper on that. If you are not of voting age yet, you probably have family members or friends who are. There are in many states opportunities to work the polls if you're not yet of voting age. So just because someone is not yet eligible to vote themselves doesn't mean that they can't be someone who's part of the National Voter Registration Day and broader voter registration effort. Same sort of general principles would go for something like citizenship status. You should never sort of ask someone directly if you feel like it might make them uncomfortable if they're a citizen, but note that you need to be a citizen in most places to register to vote. And that's always true in federal elections. So just sort of note that that's a criteria for being eligible to register to vote. But if someone is not, again, ask them to think about how they can be a force multiplier if their friends and family need help getting registered to vote. For people who are justice involved, who are returning citizens, the resources there vary, or the sort of regulations there vary by state. So you can refer folks to resources on eligibility for returning citizens for registration and voting. We do lots of work on college campuses, as does HeadCount, with students who are attending school from out of state. There's often a lot of confusion about where you can register and vote, depending on where you go to school and where your home state is. Just refer people to resources. And last but not least, and this goes for sort of all these things, never waste a conversation. Not everyone you encounter out there in the community is going to be eligible to vote today, or maybe ever, but think about how you can engage them on these important topics, and help them be someone who can register others in their community and get them involved.
+1 to everything Lauren just said. Absolutely. We in the field, we always have resources, and you can actually find them if you go to headcount.org and you look in the footer of our website. You can find a map with laws for people who've been previously convicted for a felony. It's like a short explainer, like if they need to take an extra step or where they are in the process as they can register. We also have a link for if you think you're too young to register, where we have a state-by-state guide for what age you can register in the different states. And I think one of the things that's also really exciting about National Voter Registration Day being right before a major primary season is that I believe 17 states allow 17-year-olds, it might be 17 or 18 states allow people to vote in their primaries if they're going to be 18 by the general election. And this is just such a great time to talk to young people and get them engaged in their primary process. And voting is habit forming. So if you actually get them involved in candidate selection during the primary, you're likely going to have a voter for life because they will have seen their power and their effect at 17 years old. So that is something that I just really believe in, especially if you're going into spaces either with families or with students, making sure that that's communicated. Again, that's all on our website. Beyond that, one of the things that we encounter a lot is people who are just transient. They're moving to college, but they're also just moving a lot. And I think we've actually seen since the pandemic, more people that are just kind of moving around or van life or, just have taken a different approach to short-term leasing and house camping, as some people call it. And I think it's really important to take a little time to be like, okay, well, if you want to participate, like, is there a place that you're still calling home? Is there a place that you're going back to? And being prepared to have like a little bit of a conversation around like, well, you can still have like an adventurous life and have a home and vote there and make plans to be invested in that community. So, I think that those are all important steps towards making sure that people know that their participation is welcomed and accessible for them, no matter what their situation is.
I appreciate that. And I love the sharing of resources for folks to use so that they're more equipped to talk to registered voters. So with that said, what information is it important for those registering voters to have in their back pockets as they're out there registering good people?
You must, and well, actually, Lauren, this I probably shouldn't have given this one to you, but you need to know what the ID requirements are for your state. So you can talk about that some more, but that's the number one thing.
Always on this, Chapin. Thank you.
So Vote Riders will help you get it if you don't have it. But for my population, a lot of times people do have an ID. It just might not be an up-to-date ID. And that, if it's not, that can present challenges when you are going to vote, but you can always register to vote with either your social or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And I think that that's knowing what your state rules are around that are really important. It's also extremely important to make sure people register to vote at their physical address. People all the time put in a PO box, a mailing address, a campus dorm name. Like, these are like super common things. If someone is unhoused in their state, there will be different rules around that. A lot of times you can like use a shelter address. It's very variable on the state. Again, resources from that can be linked out to on our website, but making sure people are using a physical address when they register, that they put in a qualifying ID number and they have that information. And then another thing that gets people's registrations messed up, and I will encourage you to keep an eye on, is people will not put the signature date. They'll put their birth date underneath the signature. And most states actually have a legal requirement about the signature date and delivery of the application. And so many voter registration applications get turned away because people don't put the right date in the signature block. So those are just a couple of things that I would throw out there as top line information to watch out for and be aware of.
Those are all awesome pro tips. You can tell she's a veteran. Other things I would maybe add to that, it's likely that people might ask kind of, who are you and who are you with? Like, what organization are you representing? And basic things like that. I've had people ask me like, what is National Voter Registration Day? Why are you here? The National Voter Registration Day Field Toolkit has lots of good talking points for that. 2, I'm going to take your question, Alan, very literally. 2 really good things to actually have in your back pockets, assuming you have 2. One is voter ID information cards, as Tappan noted, in 38 states. Once you're registered, you then have to show a specific form of ID to successfully vote. 17 states since 2020 have passed new or stricter voter ID laws. So the rules of the game have changed when it comes to what specific form of ID is accepted at the polls. Lots of states have added ID requirements for voting by mail. You can order voter ID information cards for free in unlimited quantities. There's no hitch. I think Travis is going to send the link around, but it's voteriders.org/cards. If you order them now, they should hopefully be there in time for National Voter Registration Day and all through election season. And a second thing to have in your back pocket, and most people will have this in their backpack pocket already, I would just say have your phone and have a trusted source for election information bookmarked in it. No one's expecting you to have all the answers. No one is expecting you to know where every random voter who approaches you polling site will be on election day. So just have a couple sites that you trust bookmarked where you can look up information for people on the spot. And that might vary, you could always go to your state election office site. I know lots of League of Women Voters chapters and partners are here. You might want to go to Vote 411. So just make sure that you're prepared to assist people on the spot with the different types of voting information they might need, but make sure voter ID is one of those.
Can I tag in one more thing? All of that as well, but one other thing, headcount traditionally targets people that are younger voters, 18 to 29. And because of the incredible diversity of Gen Z and our upcoming generations, we've really had to focus on making sure that we have things in a couple of languages. And so if you have the opportunity to have a couple of Spanish forms with you, or if there's another language that is used in the community that you're going to serve, I really do recommend just having them. The forms do the work for you. You do not have to be an expert in the language as long as you have those available. And I would also plug that HeadCount's website is fully available in Spanish, including all state-by-state election information and digital tools. So it's a great opportunity and resource if you want to give a little bit more information about what you need to vote or different ways you can vote in a language that's not familiar to you.
Thank you both for that. It's great information and appreciate that. There was a question that someone had put in the chat that I'd love to ask, if you can give us some more information on it. How do we motivate eligible voters who might be cynical about elections and voting in the general? What about motivating voters in 2023 when there are so many who are already looking at 2024?
Big question, really good question. I'll sort of first take the cop-out answer. So if someone says, I don't care about voting, I want to vote, all you're asking them to do on National Voter Registration Day is just register. Registering to vote is not committing you to anything. It's easy. You have nothing to lose. It takes 30 seconds, 2 minutes max. Registering to vote will give you the option to vote. You might not be interested in voting now, but you might wake up on election day in November 2024 and really wish that you had registered to vote. And in many states, there are voter registration deadlines that come before election day. Not all, check your state. But the sort of easy, quick response to that is we're just asking you to register. Do it now, and you won't need to do it again in 2024 as long as you don't move or change your name. Low commitment. The sort of bigger question around whether or not people have interest and motivation to vote, that's a much bigger question. It's probably not something that you as a stranger are going to solve in a 45-second conversation. But I was reading something a couple weeks ago about the average number of times you need to ask a consumer to buy something before they make a purchase. And I think, think about the conversations you're having out there with voters on NVRD and other days as one of those touches, right? You are selling democracy and asking people to vote. And it might not stick the first time. It might not stick the second time. But many people are never asked to register to vote. Many people who then have no vote history are never asked by candidates or parties or others to vote. They don't get the reminders. So, you're part of a long-term, long game collective effort. One final thing I'd throw in there that goes back to my registering people smoking outside of bars. If there is sort of an immediate issue that you can tie to voter registration and the act of voting, that's always a really good hook to get people thinking about, why not? I'll just register to vote.
Yeah, so I'm going to give the short answer. And I saw someone in the chat asked, what is your 90 seconds to get somebody to register who's not interested? And then I'm going to give a little bit of a headier answer. So the short answer is, whatever it is, you can vote about it. And that's the truth. And that's one of our taglines. You have the power to vote about it. So registering opens that door. Maybe there's a ballot initiative you care about. Maybe you want better funding for public schools, or you want more Frisbee golf baskets at your local parks. Whatever it is, you have the opportunity to vote about it. And so I think that is a very simple, easy line that captures nonpartisan messaging, because you're not telling them how to vote. You're just saying you can vote about it if you care about it. So that's one point. But in 2023, I think a lot of us are already thinking about a presidential election that seems like the primaries might not even matter, or it seems like things are already set for us and we don't have a lot of power. And I think that this is the moment when people claim their power, and that's the message. So when you vote in local elections, when you vote in state elections, and when you vote in primaries, you're developing the candidates of the future. You're developing the public leaders of the future and giving them an opportunity to participate as candidates, and then also as elected officials and lawmakers to develop their experience. we're supposed to be in a representative democracy, and less than a quarter of people participate in primaries on average. I think it's actually 27%, so slightly over a quarter. But like on average, that's your primary participation in presidential years. Even less in local elections. Alan, I think you said 15%. That means a very select few are making the decisions for all of us, and that is simply not representative. So if you feel like you are disengaged or you feel like you don't have voter power, like this is the moment to claim it. And if you don't claim it now, democracy is not going to work for you. You have to put in a little effort to claim that power.
Those are great points, and I appreciate that information. And it seems that you have inspired folks to start asking questions around how they can better prepare for this day. So here's another question that came from one of our viewers today. What are some different things to keep in mind depending on the type of voter registration event, where it might take place, or community particularities? Like what should people be mindful of when they're doing their voter registration?
I'm going to say two things. One is you should know the legal requirements for doing a voter registration drive in your state. There are some states that require that you have a certification. It actually, if you don't already have it, it probably takes like a 20-minute webinar. But I would highly recommend making sure that if you are planning on running a paper voter registration drive, that you have all requirements met before you go out, because you don't want to be excited and then have an issue later on. If you're running a digital drive, those requirements are vastly different. So just be aware of that. And I think that the other thing about going into different communities, and I'm going to refer back, I think, Alan, you said this as well, but if you go into a community space to register voters who you think are not being served, and you treat it as a transactional interaction, and you're not coming to that community to genuinely be a part of that community or uplift it in many ways, your response is not going to be as great, and you might not wind up coming back or having the impact that you want to have. So when you go into a space, be a good guest. Come with please and thank you, come with resources. Maybe you want to give stickers or have bubbles for kids, or whatever it is that you want to have to make it a fun event where you're able to engage and like really have that connection with people, as opposed to coming just to serve the end of registering voters. So just think about how to be a good guest in those spaces, and come and represent yourself as a guest and a member of the community that wants to develop a deeper relationship. And that turns into a much more meaningful interaction than thinking about it as a transactional service.
The one small thing I might add to that, and this is based on my personal experience in DC where I live, and with Headcount, where I like to volunteer whenever I can, think about where people are going to be from that are at the event where you're registering voters. So in DC, for example, folks are often voters from DC, but also from Maryland and Virginia. So be prepared to know sort of different sites and different rules and regulations around registering to vote for the different states that people might be coming from at your event. Also, if you're somewhere like a baseball game, or, at DC, lots of tourist sites have people from all over the country. So just be aware of the fact that not everyone is going to be sort of from where you're physically at and voting in the local elections that you're kind of prepped to speak on. So, just sort of think of that. And I've said this a couple of times already, but also think about what type of issues, based on where you are, what type of issues and one-liners and talking points might be a good hook to draw people in, if the bubbles and candy for the kids doesn't work, but that always works.
If an individual is unhoused, how can we help them get registered? They asked specifically about Pennsylvania, but if you'd like to share anything about McKinney-Vento or some resources that they can use, please do share anything that could help help register more people who are experiencing homelessness.
I'm going to track down a link that lists out all the different state rules, and I'm going to drop it in the chat because I would be remiss, because every state is a little different about that. I'm sure, Lauren, you can give some more specifics on the ID piece of it for the states that require it. But I will say, like, empowering people who are unhoused is, like, I believe, one of the biggest things that we can do, especially right now when our homelessness rates are going up at such a high rate and so many people are facing housing insecurity. It's also a time where they're in a very sensitive situation. And so I think, like, honoring where they are in the process and the questions that they're asking without, like, making any assumptions is super important. But I'm going to find that link that tells you what to do in all the states, and I'll drop it in the chat. And Lauren, I don't know about ID stuff. I'm sure that's a whole other thing.
Absolutely. There are a bunch of good resources out there. Nonprofit Vote, the managing partner of National Voter Registration Day, has some good ones that I'm sure Travis and Karen will share in addition to whatever Tappan digs up. I can share at Vote Writers, we do lots of work on site at shelters and with unhoused individuals. It is really transformative. It's crazy to think that this plastic piece of paper, can unlock not just the ability to vote, but access more stable housing, formal sector employment, healthcare. So there's a huge need for ID services to register and vote from unhoused populations. We have staff on the ground in 8 states, but take referrals from organizations virtually. The best way to have someone who is unhoused be in touch with us to get the process started to get free ID to then register and vote is to call or text our helpline. It's 866 ID to vote, the number 2. They can also go to our website at votewriters.org/free help. And they or someone sort of like a caseworker acting on their behalf can enter their information and we'll follow up with them to get the sometimes long, sometimes expensive, but always worthwhile process started to get them the ID they need to unlock a lot of civic and other social and economic opportunities that have been denied to them because of a lack of ID.
What is a good kind of one-liner to connect how elections, laws, and how they impact our daily lives, particularly for young people?
A one-liner for a college campus voter registration. I think that's really interesting, especially for freshmen who are moving in, because it may not feel like home yet and they're not sure where they want to vote. I think that when you are going to college in a residential setting specifically, and you're out on your own for the first time, it's an opportunity to kind of develop your own values and act in your own space. And it's a great time to say, hey, this is something you get to do now. Let's not miss a chance to do it. I mean, you have the opportunity to use your voice in elections and also to impact our community. Open the door, and I think that that is, for me, a way to talk to people who are at that age. Like, this is something you could never do before. You kind of have your checklist for moving in, your checklist for things that you're learning to do on your own. Maybe you're re-registering your car or whatever. And this is an opportunity that you have at that moment. Now, connecting it to the issues, because we are a nonpartisan organization, like we don't dig into that too much, but I will tell you, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of research recently to talk about who young voters are in this upcoming election. And it's really phenomenal, the amount of life experience that has defined them. Like, one stat that has just blown my mind is that 88.5% of the counties across the United States in the past decade have experienced a climate disaster. That issue has really impacted people. And a lot of these young voters have experienced that over their childhood. You also have, 3 to 4 young Americans getting murdered every day because of gun violence. Those mass shootings have defined the experience of these young voters. And this is the time, like, whatever they feel about those instances, these are things that are impacted by policy. So I think that without and it's very different than when I was 18 and 19 years old, where it all felt very theoretical. What they have experienced is very real. And so these are the elections that will define the outcomes that can change their lives. And I think that that's really a great way to lean into it.
Absolutely. And the research on messaging backs that up. What has been found year after year, and particularly in recent election cycles, is that for older generations, the sort of do your civic duty and your identity as a voter, that is messaging that resonates well. For younger voters, they're not into that. They want to think about the issues and they want to think about asserting and claiming their power and all of those tangible lived experiences that tragically so many of our young people have been through and will continue to do so. Those can be great, motivating, illustrative ways to bring people in and encourage them to cast a ballot this election and in everyone going forward.
Do you have any tips for keeping volunteers motivated when a lot is asked that might result in what seems like a few registrations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would just help everyone to remember, I would encourage everyone to remember that you are part of a huge collective day of action on National Voter Registration Day. You are joining with thousands of partners across sectors and across the country. And every little bit makes a big difference. And also think about the fact that even if you register 5 people, they're going to go home and talk to their friends. They'll say, hey, did you know National Voter Registration Day is a thing? It was really easy. I did it. You can do it too. So this is a long game. This is sort of a collective, long-term effort, and it's a ripple effect. And thank you all for being a part of it.
You know, that's something I've been on calls about recently, how to keep your volunteers uplifted when there's a lot of rejection. A lot of people are like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm already registered. A lot of people see you approach them with a clipboard and walk right away, turn their backs, look at their phones. I'm sure that we've all experienced that or been the people who ran away from the person with the clipboard. And that is part of the process. But that one registration, the first one that you get, or maybe for every 50 rejections, you get 2 or you get 3 for 100, whatever, that is the most incredible rush of energy. And if you can stick it out to have that impact and have that personal connection and succeed, I mean, for me, it's like a natural high. Like maybe I get too excited about democracy, but I think it's like a really powerful moment in knowing that you've impacted that person's life and been able to help them find their own power as a voter. So I think like holding out for that, but also if your volunteers are really struggling, think about ways to think about retraining or providing them additional resources for success. Like if they have an approach that's not working, if they're passively hoping that people are going to walk up to them because they look nice versus walking up to other people, like try to give them resources for success by redirecting and retraining and like uplifting what they are doing. And if they're really having a bad time, have them take pictures, have them tell the story on social media for your organization, give them something else to do that can feel super impactful, that is uplifting the day, so that they know that they delivered value. Because for me, for headcount, and I think also for this sort of event, like bringing people into volunteerism is the core of democracy. This is the core of civic engagement. And we want to make sure that people leave feeling like they did something awesome and stay a part of the movement.
Thank you for that. I want to once again thank Lauren and Tappan for taking the time to share all these great resources and this beautiful information about how we can all play our part in democracy. I would like to also add that on National Voter Registration Day, or just voting in general, that it is not transactional. So we are not paying people or giving people things to register to vote. We are simply informing them and inspiring them to do their part in democracy, right? So always be mindful that you are what we're selling, right? The best person available to speak to people is the best that we have in democracy. So bring your perfect imperfections to the table. We love it. And with that said, I'd like to thank you again for participating in our webinar. Thank our special guests for their time. And thank you again to everyone who participated in the webinar, because we very much appreciate your involvement in democracy. Thank you again.